I was born in 1952. I was brought up in Pittsburgh, actually the suburbs of Pittsburgh, a little town called Lawrenceville, which is, I'm going to say, maybe 10 miles, 7 miles outside of Pittsburgh, the city of Pittsburgh. Uh, and we stayed there in the city, kind of the back alleys almost. My parents, we pretty much lived in poverty. My dad was a plasterer, mom was a housewife, took care of my brother and I, brother a few years older than me, and really didn't have much money. Um, so my mother, after I think I was about 4 years old, kind of pushed my dad. It was pretty dangerous, just with traffic, small alleys. My mother just was always concerned about my brother outside playing in the streets, and she convinced my dad to move us out to the suburbs, further suburbs of Pittsburgh, a place called O'Hara Township, which had woods and fields and farmlands, and just a totally different experience at that age um, for my brother and I. I first became interested in art, oh gosh, at an early age. I think probably when I was about 6 years old. My brother was in, my mother always wanted my brother to go into show business, so he was in a lot of theater events in the Pittsburgh area, kind of off Broadway actually stuff. Even at the age of 10, he was in things like South Pacific, Music Man. He was into acrobat dance, ballet. So I would always be pulled along into all these events and all my brother's practices. And mother just kind of threw me a coloring book to keep me busy. So that's, I think, how I started getting into drawing and coloring, probably at the age of 6 years old, just to keep me busy there while my brother was going through all his rehearsals. I suppose another major contributor, inspiration, was cartoons. Every Saturday morning I used to watch cartoons. Tom Terrific, Popeye. I just was wrapped to that TV. I think I just admired the animation, admired the drawing in it. Then there was a show called John Nagy. He was an artist, kind of the Bob Ross of the old days, and I was just just obsessed with watching him and drawing along with him. And I got an early kit my parents bought me and drew along. Um, and then I noticed, I think in fourth grade, where they chose me to go to a group here in the Pittsburgh area called, out of the Carnegie Museum actually. It was called a Tam O'Shanter class, which were unique, kind of semi-gifted children they would find in the public school system and send them off on Saturday morning classes to another kind of outskirts city of Pittsburgh called Oakland, where the Carnegie Museum was. And I would go there every Saturday morning. Did that from fourth grade, I think, until maybe eighth grade. Uh, Pretty unusual in that I had to take a bus and a streetcar from the suburbs of O'Hara Township into and connect over in the Lawrenceville area, and then once again connect over into Oakland, and change buses and streetcars at the age of 11 years old in the kind of inner city of Pittsburgh to get to Oakland. Didn't even think anything of it, nor did my parents. Parents didn't have a lot of money at the time, so I kind of did this all independently from the age of, I'm going to say, 11 years old until I was maybe 16. Those classes were really, really rewarding for me. There were a group of about 200 children from all different neighborhoods of the Pittsburgh suburbs, and the teachers there were just a breath of fresh air to give you a little bit of guidance on these Saturday morning assignments, and kind of tell you how special you were, how gifted you were. And that helped a lot for my confidence as it came to, actually probably even kept my confidence all the way through my business and experiences. My 15 minutes of fame was, auditioned to be on a national TV, actually probably one of the first American Idol type talent shows called Ted Mack's Original Amateur Hour. And I was lucky enough to make it through the auditions and onto the national stage. And it was pretty exciting. I think I was 11 years old, and I was into music as well. So that was pretty much a pretty big deal, even at my elementary school. Again, probably only in I think 4th or 5th grade at the time.
KDKA in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Our auditions. This is Ron Jesiolowski. How'd you pick the marimba as an instrument?
Well, it seemed most interesting than any other one, and I get a lot of fun out of it.
You get some fun out of it. I think you're a little nervous, too. You don't want to talk much, do you? Go ahead, start playing that thing. We'll relieve you of all your responsibility. Go ahead.
I think the other thing that got me into the fantasy world a lot and creative arts was our movie making. My mom bought my brother and I a little camera. I actually bought for my brother a little movie camera, an 8mm movie camera back. I think he was probably only maybe 14. And we would make these monster movies and haunted house movies and animations and stop and go. Used to watch like Ray Harryhouse and many old King Kong and Jason and the Argonaut movies a lot, and we just wanted to be movie stars. So we spent a great deal of our youth, probably from the age of 11 until I was probably 15, making movies. It was a great time. But I was always doing my artwork, and all the way through junior high and high school, I was always doing just creative things, pretty much spending even my Friday and Saturday nights sometimes up in my bedroom drawing, to the point where my parents actually were getting a little bit concerned about me. Then after high school, I was during the Vietnam days, and pretty scary time. They actually hold tickets and lotteries in your birthday, whether you could draft or not, was a means by which you were selected. So high school was finished, and I decided to get myself over to art school, going to Ivy School of Professional Art, and which ended up being supported by Art Institute. That was a really great time. I just had really, with a whole bunch of peers of my own who were very, very creative people from all over the place, and a lot of, probably a little bit too much partying, but that was the late 60s, early 70s, and that was the way of the world back then. Well, the reason why I went into commercial art, which is fine art, was, I knew I needed to make a living. And this seemed like the best hybrid of both of those would be going into the world of graphic design, where I could still be creative and use some of my art skills associated. There are a lot of similarities. You need to know composition, obviously. You need to know color. You need to know some of the fundamentals associated with visual communication. So it seemed like a natural fit. So I packed up my portfolio with what pieces I had in that I've done in art school, and hit the road. There weren't really that many, I would say, commercial type pieces in there. It was mostly illustrations. But luckily they were detailed enough and probably of the right quality that I was able to land, at least make myself respectable when it came to the marketplace. I guess what was so satisfying is I've learned a lot of discipline. My first job was at Westinghouse. The first job I can remember, I think that was kind of more formal, was at Westinghouse Atomic Energy, where we were had to go through clearance with that, kind of top secret work, working on atomic submarines. I was only probably in my early 20s, and it was more of an engineering platform. And I think some of the pen and inks I probably had. I still wonder why they hired me. I had long hair at the time. It was a night shift. I worked from 11 o'clock at night until 7 in the morning in a very small department of Westinghouse. Actually, it was an on-site contractor. And we took on sketches from the engineers and had to kind of refine them and clean them up and do pretty much schematic drawings. At that time, obviously, there were no computers. It was all done really drawings on linen material because of archival purposes, so they would last and not disintegrate. And they were done with these primitive pens, almost inkwell type pens that you had to draw. If you made a mistake, you had to use an electric eraser in order to fix it. Each letter had to be hand printed on these blueprints, and there was paragraphs of copy. Sometimes they had to be applied. And it'd be obviously very, very legible at the same time. So a lot of discipline associated with that really buttoned me up as far as discipline and tightness, and I started really enjoying working with pen and ink. Again, very technical. So I took some of that and applied some of those skills, even some of the drawings, into a more creative environment. So the things I drew that were pretty much scratch and practice there, I could take those home, and then I took some of those drawing techniques and applied it to my own creative endeavors. That gave me experience working with engineering. It gave me experience working with engineers. It gave me experience in tightening up my drawing skills, and that gave me an opportunity to work for a place called Society of Automotive Engineers. You might see that on your oil cans, SAE 10W20. That's Society of Automotive and Aerospace Engineers. And I did the graphics for them. I did the drawings for them. I was a production assistant. Again, very medieval times when it comes to graphic arts. You had to paste up pieces of copy onto a board. And all the drawings had to be hand drawn. And I did that job for about 6 or 7 years, which led me into other opportunities and getting even more experience in the printing processes, as well as in the graphic processes, as well as in drawing and technical engineering per se. I think it was probably the experience in the engineering drawings that led a group called Pennex Products, which was a pharmaceutical manufacturer of over-the-counter health and beauty aids. So they would do the packaging and branding and design work for products like Rite Aid or CVS or Walmart, all over-the-counter health and beauty products. And I became kind of, eventually went in there as art director and grew the department. There were, again, at this point, no Apples, no Macs, no computers. I did packaging and branding for them for about maybe 5 to 7 years. And that then led me into opportunities with GlaxoSmithKline, SmithKline Beecham, big pharmaceutical consumer product companies doing products like Tums and Aquafresh. And I did all the packaging and branding and design work with them. The design I didn't personally do myself all the time, and more ideation, but I had large New York firms working for me, as well as a staff of maybe 30. It grew over time. At that point, we had all Mac-oriented, all app-oriented, and really the budget to deal with the best technology that was available. As you can see in some of those examples, also went from there into packaging with Del Monte. the pet business. So same role pretty much. It was anywhere from managing the supply chain, all the labeling associated with it, purchasing a pre-press, design them, and designers, production management of getting product to market, and some innovation as it relates to design direction as well. The other thing that was so satisfying when I worked at Glaxo was working with just the cream of the crop when it came to discipline and expertise, and anywhere from marketing and operations and sales, engineering, packaging engineering folks, quality control people there. And when you manage these large packaging development departments, you just require the expertise of so many different disciplines. So I got to work with all these people, and I had to incorporate a lot of those learnings into kind of managing the hub that the packaging and the branding department become, because you have to you have to collect information from all different sources, anywhere from market research, obviously the consumer, market research people, the marketing people, the sales people, just to figure out you're getting a position visually for the brand or the product. But then you have to homogenize that with all the technical aspects and the supply chain aspects. So you have engineering, distribution, quality control, legal, regulatory affairs when it comes to all the pharmaceutical labeling. So you have just a whole plethora of expertise that you need to organize, manage in order to come through getting a product to market. So I love the diversity of that, and I've learned from every one of those different disciplines, and it made me kind of unique in a way where I could be extremely disciplined, and at the same time I could be extremely creative and bring those two worlds together. One of the more satisfying things for me was when I was working at GlaxoSmithKline. We had a brand, Aquafresh was our brand. We had a toothbrush, and we were struggling with launching a new children's toothbrush. You know, the competitors out there were P&G, Crest and Colgate, a lot of competitors, Oral-B when it comes to toothbrush. Struggled with getting license agreements, couldn't necessarily afford that with some of the toothbrushes for children, you know, for instance with Marvel or with Disney. Just didn't have that kind of budget, so they struggled worldwide with a toothbrush for children, and I guess they eventually came to me. You know, GlaxoSmithKline is a global company, and the product's distributed globally. And they came to me and wanted some ideas. I came up with an idea of a toothbrush called the Flexosaurus. Our toothbrush was called a Flex. I figured everybody likes dinosaurs, every kid likes dinosaurs. So I came up with this little idea, sculpted it, did rough engineering drawings for it, had it manufactured, and it really became a hit. It was actually #1 in the children's oral care category for years. And I have patents on that in, I think, 60 some countries. And I believe probably it's still in distribution in some of those countries. Again, we're talking maybe 30 years ago now. But that was most rewarding for me, where I got to do the packaging for it, actually almost sculpt and design the piece itself, as well as doing the branding for it and coming up with the product name. So why did I decide to teach? Well, after about 40 years in corporate, wrestling with all those challenges, I just figured that I need to do more. I always wanted to teach. I taught my daughter, she's an art teacher as well, how to draw. And I just figured, close to 60 years old, pretty much had enough of the corporate world, wanted to explore my own fine art to a greater degree. So I retired and just went full force into my own art. I never really gave up on my artwork, even when I was going through the commercial world of things. I always had 1 or 2 fine art pieces going at any given time. So I still enjoyed that a lot. It was a nice escapism. But at the same time, I wanted to kind of get more focused on that and really kind of explore, kind of teach myself how to be better at painting and drawing. So, a good opportunity to do that. I got to tell you, when you teach, you end up teaching yourself a lot at the same time, or you learn from your students. So I teach at a couple local universities here in Pittsburgh area, Waynesburg on the Roche. I teach drawing, painting, printmaking, advanced drawing, pastels, watercolors, pretty much any two-dimensional type of art. I've had maybe, at this point, maybe 10 years of accumulated teaching experience at a university level as well. And just really, really enjoy it. It's great for ideation. It's great for a discipline of me coming back home and even doing additional research on techniques or art history, and just teaching myself more and more about the world of art. So I enjoy that a lot. I also volunteer with some senior citizens for a number of years, teaching them drawing. And I have a group of adults, maybe 50 to 70-year-olds, that I teach drawing and painting classes to as well, off and on. It keeps me pretty busy, even at retirement state from corporate. I think my style would probably be considered fantasy art or surrealism. I've had some pieces I've shown in the Carnegie. I'm a member of the Associated Artists of Pittsburgh, which is a pretty reputable group of artists here in the Pittsburgh area. And it gives you opportunities to exhibit in kind of more prestigious galleries in the Pittsburgh area, like the Carnegie Museum or the Escape Gallery or even the Warhol. So I've been on a number of shows. I've written up, have some pretty good reviews on it. I guess if people would ask me to define my style, I think it's probably more of a fusion between technical storytelling. Most of my stuff is narratives. There's usually a message I'm trying to deliver or get out of my own system, and maybe a hybrid between Bosch, Hieronymus Bosch. Some of the reviews I had kind of compared me to Bosch, M.C. Escher, Salvador Dali, which obviously is extremely flattering. I'm nowhere in their league, but it's nice to have the name mentioned in the same paragraph, right? So I think that's kind of how I would describe my art as more of a fusion. It's extremely diverse as you look through some of the pieces. It can be anywhere from impressionistic style to more surreal style to maybe more of a technical fantasy style. So the process typically, it's many times based on social discourse, right? What is happening in today's world that I have something to say about it, or that I feel emotionally compelled to put down on paper or put down on a canvas, and give a point of view on it. Normally I'll just read the newspaper clippings, read the net, watch the news, see what really matters to me, what's important to me, how I want to send a message to my future generations. And in fact, part of this, although it's narcissistic in a way of doing a little bit of a video about me, it is a way that I can leave something for my future generations, my grandson, my daughter, to remember me and my work by, and give people an understanding of what my art is about, really to explain my art rather than just having it in a gallery. It's certainly nice for people to interpret it the way they want to, but at the same time I want them to kind of understand how I was impacted by it, by both the work as well as the stimuli that created that work. I just want to get that documented and get it out there, so people know that I was here, right? I think it's maybe what might drive a lot of artists to do their work, is they just want to make a mark. And they also may want to inspire people, or they may want to help open minds up of people by experiencing their work. So I can start off with just a simple newspaper clipping, a photograph I saw online, and that then makes me want to build on it, sort of, and build the story. There's a lot of metaphors and symbolism within it, that sometimes there's one major message, but there's a whole host of smaller messages within, and I leave that to the viewer to kind of mold your own story around in a way. But overall, there's typically a major story. I do sceneries, and I do other things like that too. Certainly, my teachings with the adult classes as well as university are much more commercially oriented when it comes to art, fruit bowls, landscapes, things of that nature, portraits. Um, but my true work, what's really personal to me, are usually related around some kind of social movement. And so I'll have really quick sketches. I don't do intense studies. I'll just do a real rough sketch, give me an idea. Sometimes I come up with a title even before I have the piece, and the title helps me build the piece of work around it. And I even have little poems I do a lot to help explain the meaning behind my work for those who care to go there or need to just have a better understanding of what was in my mind when I did it. So I'd like to have a little bit of verbal language around my major pieces now. Okay, so just to give you an example how cultural movement helps inspire my work, here's one that's called Freedom's Light. This is during the Iran hostage crisis when we had hostages taken in pretty much, I think, for a number of years. And I had to make a message around that sort of. I have this other book I work on. I have about 3 or 4 books I work on that are children's book that I'll speak to you a little bit later about, but as well as other stories. And, here was this feeling of hostage. And so I captured that in one of my fantasy drawings of ants being captured in a spider web, more or less, and tied up in a spider web. The light coming from Freedom's Light, if you recall, I think the helicopters came in and rescued the hostages eventually, so I wanted this overhead feeling of freedom. So I simply just put a hole in the floorboards and had the light shine through. Another statement speaks to corruption, greed, forgiveness. This is really Redemption of the Conquerors, which was really an oil painting. I'm going to say it's probably 5 foot by 4 foot. The other one, obviously, the one we just looked at, Freedom's Light, was a pen and ink. This is oils. And, it's what you go through in a political environment, right? People kind of raise up to the top. They get caught up in their own little ego. They talk down to other people. Not all of them. I had a lot of great experience with people, but there are those out there who get a little carried away with their control and their power, and they eventually fall from grace. Right? And that's the statement behind Redemption of the Conquerors. Carry That Weight, another pen and ink drawing. Kind of did this in conjunction with Freedom's Light. It's a small little pen and ink. I think this is no more than maybe 14 inches by 12 inches. And again, it's the same theme of people who take advantage of other people's skills or their contributions, sort of, right? This goes back to my grandfather who came over from Poland, couldn't speak any English. Worked and slaved away for maybe $1 a day. It's a statement on that, as the one before this was. It did give if you look at the Redemption of the Conquerors one, this feels a little immigrant focused a bit. And that was my statement on Carry That Weight. There's an ant lugging a large boulder, but being given orders by a small little ladybug. Last Metamorphosis, again, did this probably back in the 80s. It's all about the kind of appreciation of life and an endangered species, and man being one of those endangered species. You can see the explosion in the back of maybe nuclear war, self-destruction. I took off on The Last Supper of Da Vinci in a way. I'm a big Da Vinci fan. This last Metamorphosis is about celebrating, as sad as it might be, the very last birth on the planet. before total annihilation, and I have that as a butterfly in the foreground. And there's little symbolism, as you can see, of war throughout the piece. Indoctrinated messages to the sensory deprived. This was 9/11. If you look in the background, it was just everything going on with this conflict in religious beliefs. Anywhere from people blowing themselves up as far as suicide bombers to obviously the ultimate state of what was happening here when it came down to the Twin Towers of 9/11. So, it's one of those things that came out through history, right? This conflict of religion, anywhere from the Crusades to the Romans, and obviously the Muslim community. These ships coming in and out of knowledge and discovery. When it comes down to philosophy or religious beliefs, the angelic telescopes looking for the answer or looking in the future or looking for their own beliefs. So you can see all the kind of symbolism within this one. A slight disorientation in life's rotational axis. I was going through my dad, who suffered through Alzheimer's for a very long period of time, and I just had to get that out. I was just very, very confused. I dealt with about 7 years of pretty severe Alzheimer's towards the end for my dad, and I wanted to make a statement to that point. And I started thinking about the circle of life, and as he was approaching more and more closer to death, and all of these feelings were just coming out of me. And I started thinking about time passing, and thus you see this kind of underlying interplanetary solar system where time is passing by through the planets going around the circle of revolving around the sun. And anywhere from my dad is kind of representative of that wise man in the front, the Merlin type figure, and just going downstream, right? Just flowing kind of uncontrollably down the stream. Another one is Carnival of Anarchy. It's kind of more recent, obviously, going on with everything that was going on with the last election. We're dealing with the last election, all these stories, all these fables, what to believe, what not to believe. No matter what side of the fence you're on, you're hearing different points of view, and it's just total chaos. And then on top of that, we have something like COVID hit us. So again, very political statement based on the chaos and social discourse, political discourse, and in the late 2020, 2018 period. You can see the representatives, right, of both the Republican Party as well as the Democratic Party, with elephants and donkeys, wild animals, sort of jugglers, mystics, things that all there presenting these illusions for us. And then obviously the freedom of liberty in the background, crying, actually, and turning almost into a prison cell. A lot of messages there. COVID, big impact on all of us. I had to get this out of my system, so I just decided to do this large abstract. It's on Masonite that shows the Earth being engulfed by the COVID pandemic, and it's, I think, yeah, it's an oil on Masonite. It's about 5 foot by 4 foot. The resurrection of the cathode ray tube. Again, a message, a social commentary on religion. This is going on during the Tammy Baker things, where you have all these false prophets on TV and on the media telling you to go ahead and send your money and persuading you to go with one denomination or another. And finding out that there's all this corruption behind the scenes in many cases, not all cases, but many cases. So it's a matter of people who take advantage of that. And then I thought it was all based on old media, sort of. Something I remember watching when I was just a kid. There was a priest on TV I was watching back in the 60s that my parents watched. I actually thought he was very, very astute. I mean, I learned a lot about the kind of religion. I was brought up as a Catholic, and just the whole thought when you're only 11 or 12 years old trying to get your hands around what this life is all about. It has just had an impact on me. So I started thinking about the cathode ray tube, which was the old traditional TV screens, heavy screens, and how that message was coming across to me, and how that's all evolved, and how now we seem to worship technology more than anything than our souls. So there's all those underlying messages there. I won't go into a lot of detail on some of these. Some of these are extremely personal. This is dealing in a world of confusion where you're trying to get your voice and you can't get your voice, and you're trying to find kind of the music of life and discover the music of life once again. That's Silence of Sanity. And I'll just go through one or two others that you see here. The revisit of the Adoration of the Magi, which was a Leonardo da Vinci piece. It's about 4 foot by 4 foot. I've always admired this piece when I was a little kid going to art school. I remember picking up, my parents would give me 50 cents, I think it was, every Saturday to buy a postcard that was at the shop there of artists. And I remember getting this one and having just a major impact on me, Adoration of the Magi. Just the fact that it was, he never did finish it. It's all done in this grisaille, underpainting, sepia kind of sketch, and that Leonardo did. And I just wanted to redo it again. If you look it's interesting. He painted himself in the far right-hand corner looking off screen just because he had so many problems with the church. He wanted to show that he was ignoring it. But so Leonardo has a self-portrait in there, and that far right dressed up almost as a knight, and he's looking off screen. But if you look right next to him, there's me. I put myself in there painting Leonardo. So I figured if I'm going to paint a Leonardo, I'm going to paint Leonardo while I'm painting Leonardo. So just a funny little piece I put in there, a touch of humor. So I won't go into explaining a lot of my other pieces, but you can just go through the roll here. You'll see at the very end where I get into more of my commercial kind of fun work. Well, I hope you enjoyed that quick show, and thanks for being so patient throughout this session. Um, and I just thought I'd show you some of the, as I promised earlier, some of these books I work on as well and illustrate. I spent a lot of time, every time going to the beach, working on Jonathan Livingston Seagull. There's a YouTube video on this one as well, drawing watercolors of Jonathan, and I put together a little story around the classic tale by Richard Bach that I just loved a lot. I read that pretty much every year going to the beach for 30 years, and I would do paintings every year at the beach for about that same period of time. I also have a children's book out there called Aaron's Incredible Pen, which was really made for my grandson, but you can get it on Amazon. And just wanted to have that as another legacy piece for my grandson Aaron. And then my brother and I have been working on a book at the same time called The Brothers of Ubiquitous Time. I've been working on this probably close to 5 or 6 years with him, which are just, probably close to 80 pretty nicely drawn, detail-oriented, graphic novel type illustrations. And we hope someday to publish that book, but we'll see. We've been working on that for years. But the illustrations are there. They're pen and ink, almost in Robert Crumb kind of style of the old comic books back in the 60s, underground comic books. And again, enjoyed working on that project with my brother. So that's kind of my story. You can see just on the reviews here. I used to show a lot, exhibit in Pittsburgh, more the kind of prestigious shows that would go on in the city, and I ended up getting some pretty nice reviews about that from the work I put in it. But now I pretty much just keep my work to myself. So thanks for giving me an opportunity to tell you my story. Take care.